scientists combined alien DNA with human cells in an attempt to create a new form of life. But the moment the syringe pierced the cell, the camera malfunctioned. Unable to see the changes inside, the researchers immediately replaced the broken camera. To their surprise, as soon as the feed was restored, they found the cell beginning to mutate. Dr. Xavier sensed trouble and hurriedly asked them to seal the containment chamber. But just then, one of the researchers accidentally dropped a screw, which fell through the grate. As the cell in the chamber grew larger, they quickly crouched down to search for the screw. However, the grate was welded in place. They couldn't move it. By this time, the cell had become very large, and no one knew what would happen next. Seeing this, the researchers wanted to leave the lab, but Xavier decisively refused, fearing the entity inside might contaminate the entire base. In desperation, one man grabbed a stool and started frantically smashing the windscreen. However, at that moment, the cell inside mutated. Seeing the monster about to escape, the man rushed forward to hold the door shut. But soon, cracks appeared in the glass. Seeing this, Xavier decisively pressed the button to incinerate the monster, but it had no effect. To prevent the situation from worsening, Xavier decided to initiate emergency measures. In 2 minutes, the entire lab would be reduced to ashes. The man grabbed a gas pipe and sprayed it at the monster, but the creature was too fast and quickly hid in a corner. The man then picked up a steel pipe, approached the creature, and began to jab it vigorously until it stopped moving. Everyone thought the monster was dead, so Xavier prepared to open the door, but the next second, the monster evolved again, growing even larger than before. The two researchers inside despaired, as there were less than half a minute left until incineration was initiated. Yet, despite this, Xavier still showed no intention of opening the door. He had to ensure the safety of the entire base. Helplessly, the others pushed Xavier aside and forcefully pressed the button to open the steel door. The two researchers had just run out of the lab when it burst into flames, reducing everything to ashes. How such terrifying alien DNA came about was a mystery. It turns out that in 1974, in an attempt to explore life beyond Earth, they sent a message into space using radio waves, including Earth's location and human DNA. It wasn't until 1993 that they finally received a response. An unknown message arrived, containing alien DNA sequences and methods to combine them with human DNA to create new life forms. Since then, Xavier began experimenting. Despite the previous failure, he never gave up. After hundreds of experiments, Xavier finally made a breakthrough. An egg cell named Syl successfully merged with alien DNA. Unexpectedly, this human embryo with alien genes grew at an unimaginable pace. In less than a month, it had grown into the appearance of a 12-year-old girl. Worse still, her body seemed to be undergoing some kind of change. The base's senior leadership was very worried about the changes, so for safety reasons, they decided to immediately terminate the experiment and destroy the experimental subject. Syl, watching the researchers bring in the poison gas, Syl seemed to realize something. Syl began to plead for help from Xavier, who was above her. Although reluctant, Xavier had no choice but to order the release of the poison gas with tears in his eyes. As the white poison gas slowly filled the entire laboratory, Syl started to feel uncomfortable. However, just when everyone thought it was all over, Syl, with her powerful alien genes, broke through the tempered glass and escaped from the inside. The poison gas instantly spread, killing the researchers inside, while Syl took the opportunity to flee the lab. Before the soldiers could catch up, Syl leaped over the fence and boarded a passing train, escaping into the distance. Along the way, a homeless man tried to take advantage of Syl, but she simply pushed him against the wall with a light push. The homeless man died like that, and the bag he had stolen was snatched by Syl. The next day, Syl learned a lot about human knowledge through the video camera in the bag. Then, Syl went to a restaurant, opened a drawer when no one was around, took the money inside, and then went to the kitchen to take some fruit and food. Hungry Syl just sat down and took out a banana, not peeling it but stuffing it directly into her mouth. After eating all the stolen food, Syl suddenly felt something was wrong with her body. Something was moving on the back of her hand. Syl went to the mirror and saw something trying to break through her face as well. Amidst Syl's painful screams, countless tentacles suddenly burst out, tightly wrapping and adhering her to the corner. Eventually, Syl slowly turned into a cocoon. A passing female conductor entered the compartment and witnessed this horrifying scene. Before she could react, a tentacle reached out and lifted her away. Not long after, Syl emerged from the cocoon, evolving from a little girl into a beautiful young woman in an instant. Meanwhile, Xavier, having received the alarm, finally discovered the body of the homeless man. Based on the traces left at the scene, they speculated it must be Sill's doing. So, to capture Sill, Xavier specifically recruited several formidable individuals from society. They were Dan, who had telepathic abilities, Preston, a former retired agent, Laura, a biologist, and Stephen, an anthropologist. After briefly explaining the situation, Xavier received another message from Sill. When they arrived at the scene, they only saw the deceased female conductor and the shattered cocoon. Laura quickly analyzed that Sill had grown into an adult. However, since they didn't know what Sill looked like now, unless she committed another crime, they simply couldn't find her. At this time, Sill had already arrived in the city center. Now mature, wearing the conductor's uniform, she was an existence that could absolutely captivate countless men. Everything around her sparked Sill's curiosity, and seeing beautiful clothes, she decisively walked into the store. Dressed in new clothes, Sill once again walked onto the street, where pregnant women and children caught her attention. As a human female with alien genes, reproducing offspring was an instinct for Sill, and she too wanted to have a child of her own. At night, Sill arrived at a motel, and watching indescribable scenes on the TV, she became even more anxious. Desperate to find a man to have a baby with, she went straight to the front desk of the motel and asked the motel owner where she could find a man. Although a bit puzzled, the owner kindly told Sill that there was a bar nearby with countless men. Before leaving, Sill even paid the room fee with the conductor's credit card. Unaware that this action would allow Xavier to pinpoint her location, the group immediately drove there. By the time Sill entered the bar, she had already set her sights on a man, only to have another woman beat her to it. Not one to give up on a man she had chosen, Sill decided to make the woman pay a price by transforming into a monster and ending the woman's life with a punch while she was in the restroom. Then, Sill continued to the bar's main hall and, flaunting her seductive figure, successfully picked up a muscular man. Soon, Xavier and his team arrived at the motel. They learned of Sill's whereabouts from the owner and even saw what Sill looked like from the surveillance footage. But by the time they reached the bar, it was too late. Sill had already left in Robbie's sports car. In the restroom, they found the woman's body. Fortunately, the bar owner had some clues. He had seen Robbie leaving with the blonde girl and provided them with Robbie's address. Soon, Robbie brought Sill back to his place, but just as they were about to get intimate, Sill suddenly changed her mind. She realized Robbie had diabetes, which meant any child born would not be healthy. Feeling played, Robbie tried to force himself on her but was promptly killed by Sill with a flick of her tongue. Xavier and his team, arriving shortly after, missed Sill once again. However, Laura deduced Sill's intent was clearly to reproduce. As for why Sill killed Robbie instead of mating with him, there must have been a reason. Sure enough, they found evidence of Robbie's diabetes in the trash can. It was a relief she hadn't succeeded this time. If Sill had borne offspring, the consequences would have been even more severe. The next day, Sill was again driving Robbie's sports car, searching for a target. While crossing the street, Sill set her eyes on a young man. Too engrossed, she failed to notice a rapidly approaching car and was struck. Flying through the air, a passerby named John saw this and quickly took the unconscious Sill to the hospital. Sill soon woke up, but before the doctor could even begin to examine her, he saw the wounds on Sill's back heal at a visible rate, which clearly surpassed his understanding. Ignoring the doctor, Sill left the ward on her own. In the hospital's corridor, she met John, the man who had just saved her. Sensing that the man in front of her met her mating criteria, Sill followed John home, eager to get to the point. Sill couldn't wait. John, having never encountered such a forward woman, felt a bit uncomfortable and was about to leave but was pulled back by Sill. At this moment, Xavier and his team, following the clues, found their way there. Sensing something was off with her keen senses, Sill had no choice but to be upfront with John, expressing her desire for a child. This made John even more afraid, and he turned to leave. This move, however, enraged Sill, who pushed John into the water, revealing her terrifying appearance and drowning John alive in the pool. Preston and Laura entered just in time to see John's floating corpse, while Sill had already disappeared. Luckily, after inspecting the scene, they found that Sill had not succeeded this time either. Unknown to them, Sill was secretly watching, realizing that as long as this group was on her tail, she would never succeed. Thus, Sill came up with a perfect plan to shake them off. First, she kidnapped a woman, then cut off her own thumb and placed it in the woman's bag. Thanks to her powerful self-healing ability, Sill's thumb quickly regrew. Next, Sil cut off the woman's thumb and casually threw the severed finger into a trash can. With everything in place, Sil deliberately appeared in front of Dan, and as soon as he called for backup, Sil immediately drove off with the woman. The clever Sil planned a switcheroo. She led the pursuing team to her and drove straight down a 100-meter slope in front of them. However, Sil jumped out of the car halfway down, letting it crash into an obstacle ahead. The pursuing helicopter, fearing Sil hadn't died thoroughly, fired a few rockets. This turned Sil completely to ashes. When the firefighters got the fire under control, they found only a finger at the scene, which was identified as Sil's through testing. Everyone thought Sil was blown to pieces, unaware it was all a ruse. As Xavier's team celebrated their victory, the feigned dead Sil began her new plan. To avoid being recognized, Sil even changed her hair color. This time, her target was none other than Preston from the squad, as the strong Preston would surely help her conceive a healthy baby. Unexpectedly, Preston knocked on Laura's door instead. Sil, standing outside, saw the cleaning lady and immediately came up with an idea. Then she used the key to open the next room, and it was clear that the cleaning lady's auntie had been in a bad way. Angered by the indecent noises from next door, Sil wondered why someone always had to compete with her for men. Just then, the room's owner returned, and it was Steven from the squad. Faced with a man who offered himself, Sil had no choice but to settle. As she couldn't afford to wait any longer, Steven, having no luck with women, couldn't resist such temptation and surrendered immediately. Less than 5 seconds after the deed, Sil could clearly feel she was pregnant. By the time Steven realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Dan, with his telepathic ability, finally realized Sil wasn't dead and was in Steven's room. He immediately called everyone. Preston burst through the door only for the monstrously transformed Sil to break out of the wall. With Steven already dead inside, the team rushed to catch up, only to find the body of the cleaner in the stairwell. Realizing Sil had escaped to the basement, they split up. Xavier and Dan took the stairs, while Preston and Laura took the elevator. Unexpectedly, the monster was not only fast but also had astonishing destructive power. It had already broken through the thick steel door and escaped into the deeper sewer system. After Xavier and another arrived, the group immediately armed themselves and pursued Sil through the sewer, fully equipped. When they reached a crossroads, perhaps due to the overpowering smell, Dan's telepathic ability suddenly failed. With no other choice, the four split up, but it wasn't long before Xavier was ambushed by the monster hiding in the water. Hearing his screams, the others rushed over, only to find Xavier dead. They had to continue forward, unaware that the monster was observing them from the shadows. After the three left, the monster leaped into the water and found a concealed corner to begin giving birth. Yet, the noise Sil made was detected by the keen Dan. Ahead, in a cave, the space was vast, and depressingly, it was filled with oil. Sil had chosen her location well, and by this time, she had completed giving birth. The newborn baby looked about 2.5 years old, could walk on its own, and even hunt. A mouse became its first meal post-birth, as a long tongue suddenly shot out, accurately catching the mouse and swallowing it whole. Dan was the first to discover the baby and greeted him friendly, but the baby, temperamental, lashed out with its tongue, causing Dan to fall from a height. In the blink of an eye, the baby transformed into a monster and viciously pounced on Dan. However, lacking combat experience, the newborn was quickly dispatched by Dan with a flamethrower into the oil pit below. The burning baby ignited the oil inside, the child aflame shortly after birth. Sil, no longer calm, sought to kill the three. She hid above and extended a tentacle to sneak attack Preston coming to support. In a critical moment, Preston drew a dagger from his body, cut off the tentacle, and averted the crisis. But before he could catch his breath, Sil leaped from above, attacking him again. Without hesitation, Preston drew his pistol and emptied his magazine at Sil until she fell into the oil pit ahead. Now Sil was aflame too. As the fire grew, they hurried to rescue Dan, hanging from a cliff. But just as they were about to pull him up, the desperately struggling monster suddenly grabbed Dan's foot, attempting to drag him down for a mutual demise. Fortunately, Preston reacted swiftly, reloading with one hand and delivering the final blow to Sil. After pulling Dan up, they finally completed their mission and left the place. However, unbeknownst to them, the tentacle that Preston had cut off was found by a rat. Considering it a delicacy, the rat that ate the tentacle immediately underwent a mutation,